Good afternoon. Now it has been a while since my last video, but regardless, we find ourselves together again to talk about video games. Specifically Nintendo and the Wii U, which seems to be everyone's favorite topic as of late. First, let me introduce this game, and hopefully you're seeing Total Annihilation, unless when I downloaded it from Good Old Games it forced me to go look for a patch and try to patch the game before it would run properly, in which case you'll be seeing Mario 3, but hopefully Total Annihilation. And I picked up this game in around 1997, and it's one of my favorite PC games, although I do have to confess that I've only played a handful of PC games over the years. And this was the precursor to Supreme Commander 2. I'm sure you know the whole story with Chris Taylor, or Chuck Taylor. That's the shoe guy, isn't it? Chris Taylor, I guess is the guy's name, and gas-powered games. I played this game online back in 1997 on a 56K modem, and being an RTS, much like Pikmin 3, I have to wonder what Nintendo's excuse is for not having online play in that game. Too hard to get the frames to sync up, I believe is what Miyamoto said. Now, I mentioned in my last video that I'd be talking about the things Nintendo is doing right, and while that list is certainly short, it's still worth a video in the interest of fairness. But before we get to that, last night at about 12:30, I was sitting on my love seat having a Hot Pocket, ham and cheese, and I thought I'd go see what Dr. Trey had to say about the E3 this year, since Nintendo is apparently not having a major press conference and whatnot. And he is apparently postulating that Nintendo is trolling everyone to gauge reactions. Never in my life have I heard such absurdity. It's almost as absurd as that Iranian president Ahmadinejad denying the Holocaust, except when you laugh at Dr. Trey you don't feel as guilty. I have to wonder what goes through the mind of someone like that. It reminds me of that movie, Cool Hand Luke. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, but there's a famous line from that movie: "What we've got here is a failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach, so you get what we had here last week." Or more appropriately, in the case of Dr. Trey, what we had here last night. And I don't have a lot to say about Nintendo and E3, mainly because I just don't care about what Nintendo does at E3. I'm watching what Microsoft and Sony have to say, and I'll be focused on trying to determine whether or not Microsoft can convince me they'll refocus on games and actually be able to hold the focus on games for the next 6 or 7 years. But I will say this regarding Nintendo at E3. I believe they wanted to use this chance to speak to distributors privately, because a lot of what they have to say to them could only be said behind closed doors. And I suspect that will involve a lot of begging and pleading on Nintendo's part for them to not cut the price themselves of the Wii U console, and promise that an official price cut will come this holiday. And I'm sure they'll be tossing out a few promo ideas to hold them over the next 4 months or so, until that price cut's able to happen around October. But to the main topic of the video, what is Nintendo doing right? Well, they're doing a few things right, a handful of things. I like their business model, and I like how they've positioned themselves in the market. They sell games with a low production value that run on dated hardware, and that's pretty smart from a business perspective. You'll never hear about a Nintendo game needing to sell 3 or 5 million copies to turn a profit, and they can probably turn a profit after 500,000 copies. As we've seen, or as we've spoken about before, Nintendo will never have third-party support, so their dated hardware doesn't really matter, since it's fine for their own games. And of course, they'll not be truly relevant having that dated hardware, but you don't have to be relevant to turn a profit, as the Wii has proved. And this whole situation with the Wii U will be a relatively quick fix, I assume, even without third-party support, because once Nintendo gets their sales expectations in check and balances their production against their more realistic expectations, I think things will turn around, and they'll at least be in the black. And the next thing that Nintendo does right is Club Nintendo. Excuse me. Although this should be streamlined and tied to your Wii U account and have its own Wii U app, Club Nintendo is still something that Nintendo does more or less right. They're giving you free shit for buying their own shit. Who can argue with free shit, right? I got Mario 64 for free earlier this month, and I played a couple hours of it, and it really worked out great for me, since I don't necessarily place any value on the game. I mean, I wouldn't spend more than $2 or $3 on it, and I ended up getting it for free for 200 Club Nintendo points or coins or whatever. So I'm happy with that. Who doesn't like free shit? Nintendo makes the best platformers, and they really have the best platformers in the business, and I think Rayman Origins came pretty close, and perhaps some people could consider it to be better than the recent 2D iterations of Mario, but generally speaking, Nintendo makes the best platformers, and I love a good platform game. And when you talk platformers, Nintendo is pretty much the gold standard, whether you're talking about the 2D run and jump games with excellent level design, or whether you're talking about huge 3D collectathons. And there may be a number of well-received gimmicky platformers on digital marketplaces, like Mark of the Ninja or Fez. I fucking hated Fez. And something like Super Meat Boy. But I'll take a cartoony platformer from Nintendo with great level design and tight controls over any of those games any day. And the next thing I believe Nintendo is doing right is Nintendo makes reliable hardware. I've owned all of Nintendo's home consoles, and I've not had a single problem with any of them since the NES. I suspect that if I were to visit my mom's house and dig up my old Super Nintendo, it would probably turn on without any trouble. And if you compare this to the PS1's overheating problem, or the PS2's disc read errors, or the Xbox 360's red ring of death, Nintendo has the most solid track record of anyone in the past 20 years, even better than Sega, who's known to have fuse problems with the Sega CD, capacitor problems with whatever the thing was, the Game Gear, even though that's not a home console. I think you get the idea. Yeah, even better than Sega. And Sega was also known for having quality hardware, and in their day. The Sega Saturn particularly. Now I've been through one PS1. I've had to open my PS3, or PS2 rather, up 4 times before I finally ended up replacing the laser. And that seems to have fixed the problem, although I don't really play it much anymore, but what the hell. The laser is $20. You know what's $20 to have a working PlayStation 2 sitting around. And I opened my Xbox 360 up and fixed it once temporarily before I just said fuck it and bought a new one, because that thing's a pain in the ass to open. And I think one small exception to this is the redesigned Wii that was released in Canada, but really to me that feels more like a bad idea that production was halted on, and Nintendo found a territory to unload its existing stock, really, because that's the only reason that I can figure out for them to have such a limited release. But lastly, Nintendo Direct conferences are a great way of communicating with the fans, and however, much like Club Nintendo coins, there's a lot of room for improvement. I don't really understand why I have to hear about these events from IGN rather than Nintendo. I don't understand why I can't watch the conferences on my Wii, or why there are guys dressed in weird, borderline creepy costumes. But it's certainly better than following Major Nelson's blog or watching that old man pretend to enjoy video games on some random Xbox video. And definitely better than Sony's total lack of communication during nearly the entire duration of the current generation. And yes, I'm still saying that we're in the 7th generation, because even though the Wii U is technically an 8th generation machine, the idea that the 8th generation truly started last year when the Wii U was released is kind of ridiculous. Although it does seem that Sony is improving their communication, and they're going to have a few Nintendo Direct-like conferences this year leading up to the release of the PlayStation 4, but for right now, I think Nintendo has the best communication with their customers. I just wish they actually had something of substance to communicate. That would be a plus, but it is what it is. And that's about everything that I believe Nintendo's doing right. There's been a lot of shit going on in the industry this week, and a lot of topics that I have an opinion on, and even a couple other videos I wanted to respond to, including one today from Broken Games HD, and I will try to get another video out in the next few days, maybe even tonight, but I'm lazy, so I can't be sure. And if you haven't done so, go back and see my last video, why that I believe Microsoft will be sticking with plans to release an always online console. And if the latest rumors are to be believed, I'm going to be proved right, in which case I will be gloating in the comments section of that video to the one guy who was giving me a hard time. But that is about the end of it. And I'll see you, or speak with you rather, sometime in the near future.